Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Thursday, June 15th Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I get the roll call, Kimberly?
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Ms. Pico,
Present.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Mr. Sale does not appear to be present. Ms. Butler does not appear to be present, and we know we're not expecting Mr. Svakunutis or Mr. Imes. We have 3 members present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So that is not a quorum. So at this point, we have one item that requires a vote, which is approval of minutes. So we'll just skip over that because we don't have a quorum. But I'd like to get first approve the agenda for this evening. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. So we'll skip over the approval of minutes, and if Mr. Sale does join sometime during the meeting, we can revisit that towards the end. But the main meat of tonight's meeting is public hearing, and it's on the Annapolis Comprehensive Plan. It's really the rollout of the comprehensive plan. We're going to have a presentation by Eric Lashinsky, Chief Comprehensive Planning, who's going to walk through the overview of the plan and some amount of detail of how it's structured. And after that, we will open the public hearing. As far as I know, nobody signed up to speak on it, but the public hearing will remain open for 90 days per state requirements. So we'll entertain testimony from the public throughout the next 90 days at any of our meetings. So this, because it's open, we'll have it on our agenda. So if any members of the public, especially after hearing this and then reviewing the materials, want to give testimony, any of our meetings for the next 90 days will be available to do that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Eric to walk us through the comp plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be with you. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning with the Department of Planning and Zoning here at the City of Annapolis. Not my first time presenting to you on the comprehensive plan, but this is it's a momentous day to finally be able to share the draft plan. I want to acknowledge that Chris Jakubiak is here. He's a consultant that worked on the plan and definitely valuable contributor to it. I want to acknowledge the internal team that also worked. Casey Ortiz is a comprehensive planner that I work closely with, who had a big role in developing the website that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Lots of contributions from other planning department staff, beginning with former Director Sally Nash, former comprehensive planner Eric Borchers, who are no longer with the city. But we've been working on this project, this 10-year comprehensive plan, since 2019. Before I started here at the city, I started in July of 2020. The process kicked off in the winter of 2019, and then COVID hit in 2020. So we grappled with the challenges of doing public outreach and engagement during COVID. Things definitely slowed down for this process. We pivoted and tried to do a number of other outreach methods to reach people virtually as much as we could. And then things got back to a little bit more of the pre-COVID normal environment where we could do in-person, and we got back to doing in-person meetings, and we've just been trying to connect with as many different communities in the city as possible during the last 3 years. I'm going to share a presentation. I have just 4 or 5 slides, and then I'm going to talk about the document and how we're releasing it. Let me share my screen here. Oops. Okay. Reverse this. All right. Hopefully you guys can see the cover of the comprehensive plan here. We're releasing the draft comprehensive plan tonight. This is the cover of it. I'll show you the contents of it in a moment. But I want to just acknowledge that we've been trying to keep the Planning Commission involved in the process for some time. These are the meetings that I've been a part of, going back to January 7th of 2021. And most recently in February, we provided a land use approach presentation, which is really the kind of the core of the comprehensive plan. How is the city going to leverage its land to the best public benefit possible? And here we are today, on June 15th, releasing the draft. The schedule has been fairly consistent for some time. It did get delayed many times over the last few years, but for the last year, we've been working on this type of schedule that I want to just walk through again. I know this is a familiar graphic to people who've been watching this process unfold, but we had a draft plan completed recently, and it's been, a long time coming. The state requires a 60-day, so the State Department of Planning, Maryland State Department of Planning requires a 60-day review comment period. And this is something that by state law, the land use article of the state says the Planning Commission should lead that. I'll share another slide about that in a moment. But because we're starting June 15th, 60 days would be the middle of August. We did not want to end the process in the middle of August, which is typically a time a lot of people aren't in town. So we're extending it to 90 days going through the middle of September. I haven't figured out the exact Planning Commission meeting date close to then, but that's essentially when we'll be ending the public comment period. So throughout, as you mentioned, throughout that process, every Planning Commission meeting, we will have the public hearing open on the comprehensive plan. It's an opportunity for folks to submit testimony, written or live, however they'd like. And then we're also going to be doing quite a lot of public outreach in other ways during that time through the summer into the fall. We're going to be meeting with boards and commissions, community associations, really anybody that reaches out to us to talk about the comprehensive plan and its relevance, to their interests, is somebody we want to talk with. Now, ideally, we would want to have a Planning Commission vote in September or at the end of this comment period that sort of says we're approving of the plan, perhaps with recommendations for changes, and delivering that to the City Council, who then takes up the plan through an adoption process, which could take some time depending on questions and interest from the council. So I think best case scenario, we would have an adopted plan by the end of the year, but we'll see. I just really want to get through the public comment period at this point and be able to deliver a plan to the City Council that we all are happy with, comfortable with. So down at the bottom, you can see there have been a number of other planning studies happening at the same time as this comprehensive plan, and those all have kind of fed into the content of the comprehensive plan. Some are not done yet. A lot of the ones that we've already done are in the appendix of, and we have those on the website I'll share. So So this is just an overview of the state code that simply says, this is really a planning commission led process. And so that's why we've been trying to meet with you as much as we can to keep you in the loop on the process. And so it's unusual in that respect. This public hearing is initiated by the Planning Commission. It doesn't require a city council ordinance or resolution. That will come later. And then finally, this is an effort to summarize all the many meetings that have gotten us to this point. Many virtual, many in person. There were 3 different task forces created by City Council that overlapped with the comprehensive plan, that dealt with issues that were really relevant to the comp plan, such as housing affordability, the maritime industry, Forest Drive. All of that, while not technically affiliated with our comprehensive plan process, it all contributed to content in the comprehensive plan. The reports that came out of those task forces have all been included in this comprehensive plan. We did a number of community surveys. And at the bottom, I just want to highlight, we released preliminary goals, performance measures, and recommended actions in the summer of 2021. Seems like ages ago. We received over 200 comments to that. We sort of asked the public to review these drafts. Those are all on the website. We promoted them heavily. We got over 200 comments, and we've responded to all those comments. We'll be posting the comment log early next week as part of this. Still just finalizing some of the responses, but it really, it did inform a lot of the goals and actions. I can probably walk through some of those in a future presentation, how some of the goals and actions were amended based on the comments we received. So I was really grateful to have that input. So with that, let me minimize my screen and share if folks at home or the Planning Commission are interested in reviewing the plan, the draft plan. This is how I recommend accessing it. Type in annapolesahead.com and it'll take you to our city website that's been dedicated to the plan since the beginning. Here you can see this prominent button that says review the draft plan. We have a little bit of a overview text explaining where we are in the process. It's an update. We've been trying to include all the presentations in this sidebar on the right side as we've gone along, and the most recent ones are here. So you click on that review and you're going to get taken to a new website that we've been working on for a couple months now. Again, my colleague Casey Ortiz did the heavy lifting on this, so I'm really fortunate to have that. This is our dedicated website to reviewing the draft comprehensive plan. This is the button to review the act, to get to the full document. It's going to take some time to load. Be patient with it. It's a large document. We're going to try to figure out how to compress it a bit, but it's it'll load. I'm going to actually go back. That needs to open in a new window. I'm going to go back to the, while that's loading, I'm going to go back to the overall site and just kind of walk you through what else is here. 2 videos mentioned previously that feature me prominently. The one on the left is just a simple overview about what the comprehensive plan is. Just assuming somebody might not know anything about it. It's a short so it's almost like a PSA for the public service announcement for the comprehensive plan. And the one on the right is one of a few videos that we're going to release. This is just the first one talking about signature topics in this comprehensive plan that really distinguish it among past plans, I think. So this first one is on walkable places as a topic that seemed to be the one thing that everybody could agree on, how to make Annapolis a more walkable place and why that matters. If you keep scrolling down, this is really the meat of the website. We've broken up the plan into its pieces as it's organized in the table of contents, and each one of these tabs is one of the chapters, and you could go into each. And so let me show you, just so this structure makes a little more sense. Acknowledgements. The structure of the comp plan that hasn't really changed in quite a while. It's organized along these three sections: the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city. Each of the chapters within those sections are, we call them elements. They're many of which are required by the state to be included in comprehensive plans by state, local jurisdictions. And so we took that structure from the state in some ways, but put our own spin on it. The demographic trends at the beginning, after the introduction, that really talks about how Annapolis has changed over the last 10 years, who we are today as a population city. And then the implementation section is also required by the state. Development regulations is aimed at what are the things we should be doing to implement this comprehensive plan, what policy-wise. Areas of critical state concern speaks to all of the interests that the state has in our local place. There's a number of grant programs the state offers, and they want to understand how we are eligible for those grant programs. So it's a short chapter, and it really just addresses some of the requirements that the state asks of us. And then finally, the recommended action matrix consolidates all of the goals and actions that are covered in each of these element chapters, and it puts them into charts that are a little bit easier to read, gives people the, I'll actually show you in a second what those look like. Basically, it's a way to keep track of all the actions, who's responsible, relative cost, time frame, etc. And then the appendices, we did an extensive number of other plans at the same time in conjunction with this comprehensive plan that were much more specific. And those are all available on the website as well. If you scroll down, you can see the appendix here. It takes you to a list of all of these other plans linked. The only appendix that we're going to include in the actual document is the comment log, and we'll be adding to that, of course, as we receive comments to this draft. The rest of these, it would have turned into a 1,000-page document. So it's pretty big already. Going back to the website, this is really important. And I'm going to probably harp on this whenever I can. The events that we've been putting together to roll this plan out are numerous. Here we are on the 15th with our kickoff. Next Thursday, we're going to do first of two webinars. These are more intended as overviews for the general public. We'll record them, make them available on the website after. People will be able to ask questions, but it's not going to be conversational. It'll be more of a, it'll be a webinar. So people will be able to submit questions through the Zoom feature. We've already been asked by the Annapolis Environmental Commission to speak about the plan at their next meeting on June 28th. So we'll be there. I think I have to double check that time. It's usually 7 to 9, but if it is 8 to 10, we'll keep it. Then on the 29th, we'll have another webinar. We'll be back. Public hearing will be open on July 6th. I won't be giving another presentation, but every planning commission meeting until September will have that public hearing. Finally, in mid-July, we have actually 4 in-person meetings. I think one is not on here right now. There's an event on the 12th at the Hillsmere Library, but you can see on the 11th, Pip Moyer, we have an in-person event that evening. I think it's actually 6. We'll adjust these. 17th, Mount Olive Church and Parole. 18th at Michael Bush Library on West Street. We tried to do 4 in-person events across the city. We probably will be doing more than that. That was sort of the minimum we felt to really provide opportunity for people to join us without having to get online. And again, we're going to be any neighborhood association that reaches out. We want to make ourselves available to talk about how the comprehensive plan is specific to neighborhoods and well, in general, it is very kind of 30,000 foot. There is a lot of detail in this document that gets down into neighborhood scale issues. So, okay, going back to the plan. Tonight, I really did not intend to kind of go through each chapter. Takes far too long. I want to acknowledge we do have a glossary of terms, which I think will be helpful to a lot of folks who are not familiar. We wanted this document to be accessible as possible to a broad audience. Even with that mission, it still can get very technical at times. And so I think the glossary will help. I want to thank a new intern we have from St. John's College, Elad, who helped us with this glossary just recently. And I think it's going to be a huge help. When you get into the introduction, there's a few things in here that I think cover the foundations of this plan. I mean, these are the overarching. I'm actually going to pull up this view, which has the double. Let's see here. Hold on a second. There you go. Equity, health, resilience, these are the foundational themes of the comprehensive plan. You could go back to past comprehensive plans and look at the themes in those plans. These really are, I would say, of the moment. And the time we're living in today is a time where we are more aware of inequity historically in the city than I'd say we've been before, just across the board. And we're more aware of health considerations, how our environment makes us more healthy or less healthy coming out of COVID, particularly. We are all more aware of the value that parks play in our lives and the importance they are as a kind of infrastructure to the city. We can design the city to improve our health, or we could design the city to worsen our health. That's our choice. And so this plan advocates for a city that will improve our health. And then resilience is certainly an issue of our times. Annapolis on the front lines of climate change, sea level rise, has very significant impact on our city, particularly in the downtown area. And so there's a lot of content in this plan related to resilience, and not only environmental, I would say the community social resilience is equally important in this plan. Some communities are more capable of adapting to climate change than others. And we want to be cognizant of socially vulnerable communities in this city. This is just an overview of the city, the wards, how we have a map that shows how the city has grown over time. Borrowed this, kind of updated it from a annexation task force that happened, I think in 2005. And we found this map to be pretty helpful for this plan. The state gives us, as I've mentioned, a lot of guidance on how to do a comprehensive plan. And this is another aspect, the 12 visions, something that was formalized by the State Department of Planning. All of these visions have to be somehow woven through this plan, and they are. We want to just make clear what they are here. But the structure of the plan, again, is specific to Annapolis, and the plan principles, sort of another way of talking about the mission and mission statement, sort of a deconstructed mission statement, if you will, for this plan, all aligned with the thriving city, the functional city, and the adaptive city. All of these principles drive the goals and recommended actions of each chapter. We wanted to be clear about how to use the plan, particularly for people who may have not participated in the process before. And so try to give some tips on, if you're just a resident, if you're a property owner, if you're a business owner, or somebody looking to invest in Annapolis, there's value in this plan for you. And then we talk about the plan process just in general. Community participation was a huge driver of what this plan is today. And so I've talked about this already. I want to just again, the social vulnerability, this is our demographics chapter. This is a foundational component of it. The idea that there are communities in the city that are at a disadvantage already because of certain social and economic factors, some of them historically entrenched in our city. And so I think the goal is to invest in a way that is more equitable, that reverses trends that have disinvested in some of these communities over time. And that's a theme that you're going to see throughout the comprehensive plan. So with that, the only other thing I really wanted to talk about is let me go back to the website. I do want to share the recommended action matrix, because now this gives you a sense of how each of these tabs is set up. Once it opens, you'll see you have a link to this section of the plan. It's been sort of excerpted, so it's a smaller file. It'll open faster. And then there's a link to, I'm going to open this first. And I'm going to talk about it, and then I'll show you the survey. All of the actions are, I would say, they should be short-term or mid-term. If they're long-term, they're probably never going to get done, or there's a very small likelihood that they'll get done. They'll get kicked down the road to the next plan. So when you go through these charts of all of the recommended actions, there's a lot that's in that short-term category, and there's a lot that are already happening that are sort of, already part of our everyday efforts. We are not doing hard costs for projects that are recommended in this plan. That's too difficult. It's frankly not possible, but we don't have enough information for a lot of these projects. But we do want to have a sense of their relative cost to other actions. We want to get a sense of, is it prohibitive? Is it so significant that we need to do additional planning to figure out how we're going to actually implement this particular action? Or is it minimal and it's just a little more staff time to advance something? Agency, we want to be clear about who's responsible. I would say my department, the Department of Planning and Zoning, is really responsible for probably half of what's in here, but a lot of other departments you'll see identified as well. And then some of the actions are related to other goals in other chapters. So we wanted to be clear about that. But this gives you a sense of the organization of these charts. This is something that I haven't seen in past comprehensive plans here. So I thought, it's a way of frankly being more accountable to what we're trying to do, and being more clear about what our intentions are. I think for people who are interested in advancing these, it gives them something to keep tabs on. But you can see all of these actions are all in. So this is from the municipal growth chapter. They're all included there in kind of more of a text narrative form, and we just brought them in into this format. But with that, I don't want to really get too much into the details. I think that's just kind of the overview. I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. We can talk specifics if you'd like. I'm happy to do that. It's just it's a slippery slope for me, as you know, once we start getting into some of these topics.
So I had one question that I know we've talked about this some in the past, of whether if you could go over essentially in some ways what this plan isn't. I think is almost important as what it is, just so people can have an understanding of it's not a tactical plan. It's not a project plan to lay out, we're going to do all these very detailed things. It's more of a strategic framework.
That's a great point. I just realized I didn't show you the survey that I wanted to show you. That's kind of key. I'll go back to that. But to answer your question, the comprehensive plan does not have the same kind of teeth as sort of a development code, the city's zoning code, or our adopted policies in the city's development code. But it's a guiding document that sets our priorities, and so it's really intended to influence our capital budget, capital improvement program. How should the city be spending its resources? How should we allocate our land assets in a way that is beneficial, broadly beneficial? And it's a tool for all city staff to coordinate amongst each other and be aligned. This is the vision for the city, for our partners, both in government, Anne Arundel County, the state, but also in the private sector. Small businesses, institutions that are a big part of this city. It's a way for them to align with what the vision is. For example, we have a chapter on arts and culture for the first time, as far as I can tell, in the city's comprehensive plan. And that is a that is a topic that frankly, the city doesn't, we don't have a department of arts and culture. We have a Art in Public Places Commission that's all volunteer. We have a colleague in the mayor's office who is a liaison for arts initiatives, but most of what happens in arts and culture is in the private sector. It's arts organizations, it's venues, it's other government agencies outside of Annapolis. And still, there are things that the city can do to align interests and ensure that city is a cultural city. So it's that setting the vision that I think is really important. Gives people something to work towards. And I can tell you in my daily life as the comprehensive planner for the city, I use it to advance certain policy initiatives. What do we need to change in our development code? What types of programs should we be implementing to improve mobility around the city? For example, there's a big theme of bike and pedestrian safety in this comprehensive plan. The plan will give me something to advance in that regard. In municipal growth, there's recommendations on economic development that my colleague Stephen Rice, who's the economic development manager for the city, will use to advance his efforts. There's a lot in here that will align with what our Department of Public Works is doing around stormwater issues or infrastructure in general. And so that's really the essence of it. It's that vision plan, really. Let me, I don't know if there's any other questions, but let me just, I want to just share that survey link. It's pretty similar for each of these chapters. If we wanted to provide a way for people to submit comments simply, and so you could click on the land use chapter. It'll should open a new window, but it might not be. I'm going to go back to it and just say the survey link is, it's going to pop up in a second. It just asks, in each survey, depending on which chapter you click on a survey for, it'll be aligned with that chapter. So we wanted to keep comments specific to each chapter. Asked a few very basic demographic questions, so we understand who's participating, who isn't, and then just these very open-ended questions, suggestions for improving the land use goals, the land use metrics, the land use actions, and any other comments. And so this is the kind of comment form that you'll see in each of those chapter websites. So we just wanted to keep it as straightforward as possible. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier.
What do you want from us?
I want you to take a look at this plan and make sure you understand, it is a lot. You may not need to look at every single, I think as a body, the Planning Commission has members who are interested in different topics. I think you should look at the issues that are meaningful to you, that you're concerned about or interested in the future. At one of your other meetings, chime in and share your thoughts. I think we might want to set some time at future meetings that's actually dedicated to this. So it's not just a public hearing, but actually time for planning commission to discuss. I think that would be beneficial. I think that if you could, help to spread the word about this as well, in your own networks, that would be much appreciated.
A really simple question, very simple. You said to get to this website, go to Annapolis.gov and type in Annapolis.
Annapolis Ahead 2040.
Excuse me?
Annapolis Ahead 2040.
Is on the, should we go through, suggest to people they go through the website or to?
Yeah, I would just suggest, if you remember one thing from it's Annapolis, if I could type it right, Annapolis Ahead 2040.com will steer folks
Directly.
to the city's website, which then provides you this link. I know it seems like a Russian doll here, but the Annapolis Ahead 2040.com is, we hoped, would be the memorable web address for this whole campaign. So rather than sending people to the city's website, now the city's website, from the beginning of this process, we do have at the bottom of the main page on the city's website, you can see this button for comprehensive plan. That'll take you to the same place. So you can take
Actually, on the city website, on the there's a banner, there's a list of buttons that's right below the main banner, and there's a comprehensive plan one that.
Oh yeah. So wait, are
easy
you
to get there?
not seeing my screen? So that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just described, Alex.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So that's just as easy. Just clicking on that takes you to the same place, where you can then click this button to review the draft plan. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I for one am looking forward to seeing it in its final assembled form, and we, as you mentioned, we've seen most of this in one form or another, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it all in one place, and then reviewing the rest of this supplemental material that goes along with it. Looks great.
Thank you.
This is a lot of stuff.
It is. There's a lot of graphics in this document to try to break up text and just help to illustrate topics. And I hope that helps. I know some people are more visual in receiving information, and some people just like to read. But I guess I could also acknowledge that for each chapter, we tried to highlight some project or initiative that we think is worthy of sort of celebrating as something that we're doing differently, or that I think is kind of notable in recent history that we wanted to capture in this plan. And so for municipal growth, this chapter I'm in right now, the recovery zones that happened during COVID, I think were an important aspect of ensuring that our small businesses stayed afloat. We pivoted very quickly to establish those, and I think the success of those is having an impact on other decisions now, where, you know, the market space, for example, is now essentially an urban plaza. And you'll see a recommendation in the plan that should be explored to be formalized as an urban plaza in the future. I think it proved that we didn't need it as a roadway, a through roadway, or as a parking lot. So each chapter highlights interesting projects like that. You know, some might be more familiar than others, but and then, sorry, as you know, this is the way that the goals and performance measures, excuse me, and recommended actions show up in each chapter. So they're pretty readable. I think, well, there's a lot of narrative leading up to these. You could simply go to the end of each chapter and just look at these goals and actions, and you know, the rest of it is kind of the backup. It's the existing conditions, the narrative of how we got to these goals and actions. What are the issues that we're looking at that support these goals and actions? So that's the way it's structured.
And I'd like to point out that many of those actions are actions that would be required of the city council. For example, if you go back to where you were, many of those things that you recommended, you know, are, for example, zoning changes that are changes to our code. So that's not something that necessarily city department could just go do. That requires action on the city council's part to initiate.
Good point. Yes. Yeah.
You know, I think that's probably true with most of these, which, you know, I mean, to me, really shows that so much of how things happen is a function of what's in our code. And so things don't just sort of organically happen, that they're a response to the policy that we have in place. And, you know, I think in Annapolis, and this is not a value judgment, it's just more of a statement of fact, we have a lot of that policy is in our code. That's just sort of the way we've rolled for a long time that I've seen. So that much of that change in any of that policy requires action by the city council because it's in the code.
You're absolutely right.
For better or worse, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. I guess I would like to, I think I have one final plug here that kind of goes to, let's see if I have it opened already. No. I'm going to go to that development regulations chapter and just say, you know, that I think some people may be wondering, you know, how do we get from the comprehensive plan to actually seeing changes on the ground, you know, a different pattern of development, for example. And I get this question all the time, you know, and really as a city, we do need to change our zoning code. That's something that the comprehensive plan makes recommendations towards, but that is a separate initiative that I would want to advance immediately upon adopting this comprehensive plan and almost have it ready to begin a process of looking at, and we've been doing quite a bit of research as part of this comprehensive planning process for how we could make structural changes to our zoning code to yield better results. So I wanted to highlight well, I should have showed this actually when you were asking about what is it, what is the plan, and what is it not. In our development regulations chapter, this information is pretty important, just to kind of explain, daily decision-making, coordination within and between city departments, coordination with neighboring jurisdictions, capital improvement program, all of those things. And then ultimately community support. I mean, it helps in all of those areas. But what I wanted to, zoning reform, I would say, is the most formidable issue that this comp plan tries to address, and it's something that we want to work with following the adoption of the comprehensive plan. And what we're talking about in terms of zoning reform in this comprehensive plan is a shift to what's called form-based codes, which is a way of doing land use zoning that puts more emphasis on the architecture of the development and the kind of experience that it provides and how it shapes the public realm. If you look at our zoning code today, it's somewhere between conventional zoning and this zoning design guidelines in this diagram here. Form-based code is a tool that could actually help us to create the kind of walkable city that is being proposed in this comprehensive plan. And so it's I think the most important thing we can do to advance the vision of this comprehensive plan, zoning, some kind of zoning reform. And it won't necessarily mean rezoning the entire city. In fact, what you'll see in our land use chapter is some guidance on where would you begin. And it's really along our major corridors, which are still like a holdover from, the suburban age. Everything's very auto car oriented. Those are areas, and you have large commercial properties that are not being well utilized, lots of underutilized parking in some cases. Those are properties that, if there was a different zoning standard in place, might be incentivized to transition to something else. And so,
Right, and just to be clear about that for anybody who's listening, is you're not advocating necessarily for upzoning or downzoning.
no,
So in terms of density, it's more just how it's used and the pattern that any redevelopment may occur.
that's absolutely right. It's about the quality of the development and how it helps to shape the place. We want development that is specific to Annapolis, that helps to enhance the definition of the city we have today and distinguish it. And ultimately, it's about, when you look at our zoning map here on the screen, you can almost see the history of many kind of piecemeal decisions that don't really convey a larger vision. I think there are some exceptions to that. The historic district, for example, where we have our conservation zones. I mean, that is clearly a vision. This green district, it's our one mixed use district along Inner West Street. That is very much a vision. Our maritime zones, very much a vision. But then you have a lot of other residential and commercial zones in the city that I would say, harder to figure out. You had to be there. So, you had to be there at the time when that zoning change was made and what the case was. What we're trying to do is ultimately align the zoning map with our future land use map, which you can see here, which is is a foundational exhibit in this comprehensive plan. We have a future land use map in every comprehensive plan, and it really just simply says, for every piece of property, every parcel in the city, what is the best use of that parcel? And so we have these categories, and you can see a couple of things that are different. Our environmental enhancement areas have brought out a lot of parcels in the city that were formerly just kind of tucked into other land use categories. We're trying to be much more willful and deliberate in where those places are that frankly will probably never get developed, but probably add value to adjacent properties. So all of these bright green areas are environmental enhancement parcels. The red is our mixed use, and we've consolidated all of our commercial and office properties into mixed use. And it's simply to say almost every commercial property in the city could accommodate some residential, maybe it's modest, or institutional, some kind of combination of uses that would make for more effective community, where things are closer to where people live. You don't have to get in a car to go somewhere. It's all about kind of combining uses in a way that makes sense. So those are two of the bigger themes in this future land use map. And if we can align this future land use map with our zoning map, that would be the goal. So it doesn't, the zoning map is not this kind of balkanized city, it has reinforced a lot of the barriers, I'd say, in the city. So,
one of the charts or maps that I really like is, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, is the annexation map. And I'm glad you included that, because I think it's interesting to look at the development patterns as the city has grown, annexed certain parts of the surrounding area, and what those patterns look like and how they've changed over time. Where the original, we have obviously original Baroque layout downtown, but you have places like West Annapolis and Eastport that have very traditional street grids. And then you look at some of the stuff that was annexed and developed in the 80s and 90s, it has a much more suburban kind of pattern to it. And, I think we've talked about this in various projects in the past, that those layouts don't lend themselves to walkability and that kind of thing. So it's just interesting to see, how those patterns have changed over time, and perhaps that we want to get back to what we did a long time ago in that.
Yeah.
Not that we have that much undeveloped land, but when we're talking about what do we do with if there are any larger parcels, sort of setting it up as a more traditional street grid is, probably a better thing.
Yeah. I would say fundamental difference in this comprehensive plan in comparison with the last one in 2009 is we're not, in our land use approach, our development approach, we are not saying that there are certain opportunity areas like the 2009 comprehensive plan did. It had 4 opportunity areas where we wanted to funnel all the new, large part of the new development. What this comp plan is saying is that there are parcels throughout the city that are being underutilized, that are sort of, in many cases, locked into zoning that is not helpful to that property's value or the surrounding community. And so, we're left with a land use there that is not serving the best interests of the city. And so we provide some guidance on how do we distinguish those properties, what makes for a good redevelopment opportunity or infill development opportunity we're not going to be redeveloping the whole city. We want to be strategic and really do things that can have maximum public benefit. So that's one way I think about it. This is, and we talk about, I mean, this is an important exhibit for zoning. We talk about that form-based code, form-based zoning. We did this West Annapolis master plan in 2021, and it was intended to help us understand what this form-based zoning could look like. We had the commercial area of West Annapolis as our test case, I guess you could call it. And on the bottom, you have the existing zoning districts. It's this sort of odd puzzle of 4 different zones, and they're all based around the predominant uses. So either, I think there's a community commercial, convenience commercial, professional office, and professional mixed. And they don't seem to sort of have any relationship to the context around them. What is different in the image on the top are zoning districts that are aligned with the assets that are already there. So you have a zone that is just frankly Annapolis Street, the village main street, so to speak, that really respects the value of that existing community residential neighborhood to the north. You have a village corridor district that is related to Rowell Boulevard being the sort of high volume corridor on the south side of this site. You have a district that is just simply oriented to the shopping center, which is a big asset for the neighborhood. Everybody who was part of this process wanted to make sure that the grocery store stayed. And so that idea behind the village square is that it accommodates that. And then this yellow village transition zone really is something that bridges a smaller scale development zone for the village main street and something that might be larger scale, more dense village corridor. And so the village transition is somewhere in between. And that made sense to us. And this idea is something that we thought could be applicable in other parts of the city, these zoning districts that are related to their surrounding context, and then yield development outcomes that complement that existing context. So that's the idea. Yeah. I think I'm gonna stop sharing because otherwise I'm just gonna probably go through the whole document and we're gonna still be 2 hours from now.
Will the other commissioners have further questions or either about any details or the plan itself?
No, not at this time. I mean, it's a very lengthy document. I've been reviewing it as we've been discussing, so I'm sure I'll come prepared for the next meeting with some questions and clarifications.
Yeah, it's a lot, and reconfiguring what's built is difficult. You know, it's not like planning in the plains of Texas, Oklahoma. No, this is much more difficult.
Yeah.
Your sense of timing. One question: Are city department heads going to be required to read this? You know what I mean?
You would hope so.
Not sure. Yeah, I mean, they will. I'm not sure there's a requirement per se, but
I said it wrong, but
yeah,
it needs to be there. City staff needs to, leaf through this. Certainly.
Well, I do want to acknowledge that a lot of content that is very specific to departments was done in consultation with those departments. So, that I definitely leaned on public works staff and transportation staff and rec and park staff to come up with a lot of priorities. I mean, I would say we get a lot of content from the community, and then it kind of gets kind of combined with what we hear from the departments, and that's sort of the outcome. So, yeah.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, the departments have to be engaged here, and I say particularly public works. It's when we do the capital budget each year, the capital improvement program. You could go into that book that's produced that has all the lists of projects, and at the very beginning it says the comprehensive plan, is a guiding document for what we choose to fund. It sets strategic goals, and it's one of the main resources that's used to sort of determine whether something is a worthwhile investment. So,
Have you gotten any feedback from anybody in the council yet as to aspects of this, and specifically form-based code?
not directly. We've had a lot. I mean, we had several work sessions with city council and met with almost all the committees, city council committees. So we definitely got a lot of input throughout the process to know what they were interested in emphasizing. I had one-on-one conversations with the council members as well, and so I'm actually looking to continue meeting with the committees during the public comment period, just to stay in touch. So that's something else, another opportunity for the public to, those are in-person meetings at City Hall. But
Yeah, I think you're likely to get more specialized input at committee meetings versus full council meetings. Just it's a little bit more intimate setting.
Well, monumental undertaking.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I should have asked Chris, I should have asked you for any input along the way here. I mean, is there anything that you were thinking about that should be mentioned as maybe as part of the process, or anything else?
Well, I was thinking of Bob's question a little while ago. What do we need from members? And ultimately, the members are going to be asked Planning Commission to approve this. So you have 90 days to develop a comfort level with the plan sufficient to vote. And ideally, the commission votes unanimously on something this magnitude. So it sends a clear signal to the council and the mayor. But during this time, the way that Eric has structured this, there's a lot of time to make revisions, adjust things, hear comments from the residents and other interests, and present them to you and see if you want to make revisions as necessary. But at the end of the day, I'm sure we all hope that there's unanimity among the Planning Commission members and a strong support going into the city council stage, because their approval process will be different. It's not guided by law like yours is in terms of planning statutes. They will set up what they feel is best for them. And in my experience, elected officials do rely on that kind of vote of confidence they get from the citizen planners, you members of the Planning Commission. And I also want to say that I'm just thrilled with the way this document is presented. This is exceptional. And having done a lot of the plans and seen many more of them, this is just an incredible presentation of very difficult concepts. And if you read this, it's almost, if you get through, you could probably get a master's degree in urban planning. I mean, it is such a primer on planning and zoning and development and spatial thinking. It's just a fantastic document. So hats off to Eric and the staff. This is really neat document.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So actually, it reads much faster than you think, actually.
All right.
Okay, to
Thanks for
scan.
those comments.
Sure, you bet.
So if nobody has anything further, at this point, I'll officially declare the public hearing open. So anybody who wishes to chime in after reviewing all of it or parts of it, please sign up to either speak in public or submit written comments. We really want to hear what people have to say. Okay, so at this point, I think that really brings us to the end of our agenda. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I have one question before
Oh.
before I second that.
Withdraw.
Okay. Where do we stand with the findings on the Willows?
So as I had both Teresa and I have asked commissioners to provide some input into some notes that can be used for writing the opinion, and I'm still waiting for input from the rest of the commission. That's where we stand.
Well, I'm a dissenting voice. Anything but for me, a minority view?
Well, I think you should contribute. If you have something to say about it, you should contribute. And even if it's a dissenting opinion, that's fine too.
Right.
But
So who's responsible for drafting it?
the way I'd like to proceed is to deliver some notes and language that based on our understanding of the requirements and how the applicant has met the requirements and our reasoning for either approval, or if you are one of the dissenters, reasons for that. And we will put that together, and external counsel will take that and turn that into our official opinion. Because that's essentially what we did with 161 West. And I thought that went pretty well.
Okay.
So I'm still waiting for input from the rest of the commission.
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All righty. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.